Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
And now we are podcasting. This is it. Do you feel it?
Yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm like twiddling with my little buttons and everything. I feel it.
Okay, good. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. My name is David Bell.
And I'm Drew Grant. Hi.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Welcome. And we just watched, oh boy, Skinamarink.
Skinamarink.
It's spooky. Spooky stuff.
In this house. In this house. In this house.
Drew, first of all, thank you for being on. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, you're so welcome. I'm so excited to talk about this film whenever people want to talk about it.
I know you are. Just to get it out of the way, do you want to plug anything? You want to tell people who you are, where people can find you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any sort of like manifesto or any like thoughts on the world that you would just want to share?
Yeah, you can find those all on my Reddit subforum. No, you can find them over at Content Candy. That's the name of our podcast network. I'm slowly kind of building it back up again. I took like a year off to go do other stuff, but Content Candy, it has shows like Garmin Shozio with me and Lon Harris. We're starting that up again soon.
I know Lon.
Yeah, you do know Lon. He's the best. We have the Video Chronicles, which is me and Nerd Chronic, and we also have Salty Popcorn Reviews, in which we just reviewed Skinamarink. So I think that's what I've got going along. Yeah.
Wonderful. I knew you were excited about this movie. This is an interesting movie. This is on Shudder. Mm-hmm. This was in theaters, and I would describe this movie as polarizing in the horror community. And which is why I wanted to talk about it, is that it appears that on the internet, people either hate the movie or they love it.
Yeah. Well,
which side are you on?
I love this movie, but I understand how you could hate this movie. Does that make sense? Like, I saw this movie
Absolutely.
in theaters. I saw it in theaters. I had the most like viscerally terrifying experience I think you can possibly have seeing a film. Like, I was crawling out of my seat. Like, me and my boyfriend were just like kind of clawing up at each other at certain points, just trying not to look at the screen. It was so terrifying. But had you watched this at home, which I think many people are going to end up doing, I'm not sure if it's going to be scary at all.
Well, I'll run you through how I watched it.
Okay.
And tell me if you approve.
Okay.
I had to watch it at home, unfortunately. I wanted to go see it. There was like a special showing I really wanted to go to. Turned all the lights off, big screen, cranked up the sound, and didn't talk throughout.
Okay. That's it. That is how you can do it. I feel like that's an acceptable way of watching Skinamarink. Lon was trying to text me while watching it, and I was like, don't do that.
Yeah, what are you doing? What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
It has to be, I consider it, and this will not surprise many people who know me, but I consider it like a David Lynch kind of early David Lynch film, which is like, it's not so much a movie as it is like a art installation piece that he's put to the like medium of film.
Right, and I do want to talk about that aspect of this. I will say what's funny is you said, I love this film, but I understand why people hate it. I watched this with Hannah, and she gave me her permission to say this quote. She hated it, but liked that it existed, which is basically the opposite side of what you're saying, which is that it's, oh, I hate this, but I understand why people would love it, is essentially that. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it's just interesting that the debate over this movie does seem like people seem to understand where everybody's coming from, which is nice.
Well, because I think what Hannah is also saying is this movie was made for $18,000, maybe something a little less than that. I mean,
It's 15,000 is what the internet says.
Yeah.
And it's made over $1 million, which is successful.
it's very successful. I think it still hasn't reached that like Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch levels of like recouping the money, but it's certainly
Right.
hitting that like, it's getting up to that Texas Chainsaw if you like calculate for the differences. Like it's getting up to like maybe not that famous, but like it's getting up to a level of getting enough hype buzz. Patton Oswalt just did like a screening with Kyle Edward Ball, the director, and I think we're all just really impressed that these independent horror movies can get made outside of like Blumhouse or a big distributor. These can just sort of like hit TikTok and become like a big thing. So in that way, I agree with her. I appreciate that it exists, even if I don't necessarily think it will like hold up over time.
Well, that's the thing is, so something that gives me hope about this movie is the fact that I watched this house and I saw all the buzz and I'm like, are young people going to start becoming like into experimental and surrealist? Like, are we going to get a bunch of beatniks? Are we going to get an era? Because in this Marvel world, which, there's always mainstream films, whatever, but it does feel like I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong here. That like millennials and like art experimental stuff just didn't seem like a thing as much.
Well, yeah.
As opposed to like, even boomers with their hippie era and their weird fucking bullshit. Like we don't have that as much.
No.
It doesn't feel that way. And so seeing people embrace this movie, I was like, oh, that's great. Because this movie has a lot of things that reminded me of like the 70s and 60s in the style. And of course, I know the filmmaker was specifically copying that. But I do want to say, I think I have the hottest take on this film.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
Let's go for it.
I didn't hate or love this film.
Oh my God.
I am right in the center. I am lukewarm on Skinamarink.
Wow, Dave, that might be the hottest take I've ever heard.
I know.
How can you be lukewarm about this film where nothing happens, but it's very scary?
Yeah, I know. Well, so I wrote a little list and I wrote bad things and good things to explain that, and we can we can go through it if you'd like. But my basic thought on this film is that the movie kept losing me and getting me again.
Yeah.
I kept going, oh, that's really good, and then I started going, okay, that didn't. No, I don't like that. For example, I think jump scares are generally bad in a horror movie.
Yes.
And I think this movie, so
You're so close. I've been waiting so long to hear what David Bell thinks of the jump scares in Skinamarink. That's why I came on.
Here's my comparison. Do you remember when David Blaine's Street Magic came out?
Oh yeah. I see where you're going.
You already do.
Yeah.
Okay, good. David Blaine's Street Magic seemed really impressive when it came out because it felt more real. The irony of that was that David Blaine's Street Magic was actually less real than most stage magicians.
Right.
The reason why is because when you're a stage magician, you're doing it in front of a live audience. Yes, it's from one angle, but so is David Blaine's Street Magic because he had the benefit of editing and a single camera. He's just doing magic for a single camera. And what you realize later is, oh, he could have faked everything because he's doing it on camera. I think Skinamarink, their scares kind of function that way. And don't get me wrong, David Blaine had talent. Skinamarink has talent. But the way it's scaring you, I would argue, is actually a lot easier way to scare people than most horror movies.
Now, does that make that less like successful or less good or less? Yeah, okay. Because I know how you feel about
because there's no rules, right? There's we can talk about the plot, but the plot is not portrayed in any grounded way in this film, right?
No, it's not. Although there is a short film that this is based on that I think adds some context to what is going on in this film, but we can get into it. Yeah. Yeah,
the plot is basically two kids wake up, their parents are gone, the toilet windows and doors are gone from the house.
They're blipping in and out. They're blipping in and out of existence is what's happening, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just based off watching it. And then they're going in and out of sleep. There doesn't seem to be a daytime. They are in some sort of purgatory, and in that purgatory, a demon is calling to them and trying to mess with them in some way. The sister briefly sees the mom and dad, but it appears to be the parents are either in some sort of purgatory themselves, or it's a trick. It's hard to tell. She gets scared and leaves that. She goes into the basement, or I think she gets led into the basement, and she loses her mouth and eyes. And we start following the brother, who then the demon compels to stab himself in the eye.
Yeah.
And he calls the police. And then ultimately, it just seems like the demon takes him, and the whole family has been taken by this entity. That's what it there's a part where it implies that like over 500 days have passed.
Yeah, that was a good part. Yeah.
Yeah, but I liked that part. I did.
Can I give you
Oh,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go.
I have a slightly alternate read of what happens in this movie, and I think that's kind of why this movie is great. It's because like you can read so much into it because there's so little on the screen to give you context.
Right.
But I read it. The movie kind of starts out, and you find out that the son has been sleepwalking, and he fell down the stairs, and you hear like the dad talking on the phone to somebody.
Right.
You hear sort of like and you hear some sort of muffled like yelling, and it's I don't know. I sort of like a lot of this implied to me like child abuse, or like what happens in homes where there is child abuse, like the way that he talks on the phone to the cop when he's like the cop asks, "Is someone in the room with you?" And the way that I don't know, some of it went around where I was like, "Oh, is this sort of like a tale of a kid who's been physically abused and has since like retreated into himself or fallen into a coma or has gotten really sick, and this has become like a fever dream."
Yeah, that was. I'm glad you brought that up, because him falling down the stairs, there is a case to be made for this is all happening. Just the kid has, died or been in a coma or something.
Mm-hmm. Now the short. Can I talk about the short, or is it like no?
Please.
So there's a short movie called Heck that is sort of the predecessor to this film. Kyle Edward Ball, I really like him. He's part of this. When you were talking earlier about like the new kids, the new generation, and what they're going to do with horror, I would argue that they've been doing a lot of experimental stuff. Like they have been. That's like what core is on TikTok, or like what like a little bit earlier, like a lot of these YouTube shorts are. Like you can find ARG alternate reality game horror series, like Slender Man was an early one, or like there's so many like great horror things going on YouTube and like other social media platforms that we're just not aware of because we're not clued into the cultural like Gen Z consciousness. But they're doing a lot of scary stuff, and Kyle Edward Ball has been doing this thing called, I think, Bite-Sized Nightmares for a while, where he just does like moodscapes based on people's nightmares. Well, he'll have somebody write in, tell them their nightmare, and he'll read it out loud while creating this like evocative dreamscape. And so that's just like where he's coming from. And I don't think it's like necessarily cheap or good or bad. I think it is just his style, but it isn't it isn't like a Slender Man thing.
Yeah. I love the style.
Mm-hmm.
The part where the movie loses me is the part where a lot of horror movie loses me, which is the presence of jump scares.
Yeah, I thought it might be a case.
Yeah, people talk about that telephone, and what bums me out about the telephone is that the shots leading up to it, the turning the lights on and off, and the eyes in the dark, that's an image that will stay with me. But then it gets spoiled by that fucking telephone ring, in my opinion, because that to me is the equivalent of when you watch a YouTube video and it's like, look, find the ghost in this video, and then a fake fucking face jumps out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'd agree. I would say, that's the point where it lost me. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, and that's what I mean about the David Blaine of it all, which is that you can scare anybody that way. Anybody can scare people by making loud noises and sudden camera cuts. And if it's completely unmotivated because it's experimental, you can do it anytime you want. And that's where this film, I think, the crutch that they sort of were on during this film that bummed me out, because otherwise there is some amazing imagery. And what's funny is that because of that crutch, you know what movie this reminded me a lot of?
If you're going to say Smile, what is it?
No, I haven't seen Smile yet. This movie is basically Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
He brought Paranormal Activity up, set in a suburban house with a demonic presence trying to get characters while they're sleeping. They both feature like long, quiet shots, that suddenly have these like jump scare moments where you're watching for a while in this quiet. The only difference is one, I think, was done with more artistic care. This movie.
Yeah, I mean, that it sort of bums me out because I think this movie actually has a lot more to say, but I think a lot of it will get lost in like the translation of not seeing this on a big screen. Because to me, like the scariest part of this movie was not the telephone. That was an easy jump scare, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, I don't know why, but my mind flashed to you, Dave, and I was like, oh, David C. Bell's gonna hate this. I was like, David's gonna hate. He's gonna say this is a cheap, unearned jump scare because it is.
Because all it does is it just made my nerves pop. It's just popping a balloon in front of me and making me jump because a loud noise happened. But that's all. What
it did really well, I thought, and what I think it's got more to say than a Paranormal Activity, is the scariest movie in actuality, or the first scariest scene in actuality, is the scene where the girl goes into the bedroom and sees her parents. She sees her father's legs on the bed at sort of this like impossible angle, and she's told by a voice to go look under the bed. And this is where this movie is actually really interesting because what is the camera in this movie? In Skinamarink, like, what is the camera? What POV is the camera? Because the camera...
I have some thoughts on that.
The camera does crazy things in this movie. Sometimes it pans like it's on like a Paranormal Activity sort of timer, like it's a house cam. Sometimes it's like a POV, like a child's unnatural angles, just sort of staring at walls at weird places. But regardless, you're going with the girl as she looks underneath the bed really slowly, and she comes back up, and nothing's different. Her dad's legs are still on the bed, and she hears, "Do it again." And at that point, the entire theater, like, you could just feel everyone sort of, like, recoil in their seats because the amount of, like, dread, the physical dread it brings up to, like, the disembodied voice, like, the feeling of just, like, look under the bed again. It has that sort of, like, non-logical nightmare, specifically, like, a night terror, like a sleep paralysis kind of vibe to it. So everyone in the theater is, like, squirming. She looks under the bed, like, real slowly, and the camera follows her eye line, I guess. And then we come back up, and the dad's legs are gone. And the mom is facing away from her on the bed. And, like, yes, these are things that, like, Blair Witch Project did that I don't think Paranormal Activity did, which is, like, building a sense of, like, dread. It isn't just a jump scare. It's a feeling of total paralysis, of feeling like you're a child who has to, like, obey orders coming from, like, a disembodied voice, who's being given, like, nonsensical sort of, but, like, terrifying, like, directions. Like, look under your bed, look under a dark bed, Yeah, so that's just what I think is really interesting about the movie, is how it puts you in the mindset of a 4-year-old, which is way too young to be like a main character in a horror movie.
That's when I was smiling that whole scene because I was like, this is fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. And that's what I mean is the movie kept losing me and getting me again, and basically every jump scare lost me.
Yeah.
Because what that did was it honestly just kind of gave me a little bit of a headache because it didn't scare me. It's the equivalent of when a fire alarm goes off and you're like, fuck, like that's what it was, because it's out of nowhere and then it's just irritating. But those scenes are genuinely chilling and I would say show a lot of talent. And I do want to say, for the record, I think this movie is way better than Paranormal Activity.
Yeah,
I actually don't mind the Paranormal Activities. They're schlocky. They're silly, and they're I would argue that even the producers would say, like, yeah, we were going for like an easy money situation there.
Yeah, the craziest thing about Paranormal Activity is if you track actually what's happening in them, like especially like when you move over to the marked ones, which I believe is like the reboot one that takes place in like a Hispanic or Latino neighborhood in Los Angeles. I'd say like the narrative Paranormal Activities have gotten like very interesting. I think it's about like a coven of witches.
Yeah. They explain everything by the last film,
it's so
which
weird.
Was kind of interesting. Yeah.
But like no, I think that there's that part of the movie. The other part that really got me, and I do think there is a reason for the jump scares, which is you put one early enough. You put one in that scene with the girl with the no eyes, and then you spend the rest of the movie primed for a jump scare. So the rest of the movie, even when it's just for the rest of until that telephone, you don't have anything that's really terrifying innately. You're just like primed and you're in that weird tense mode of like what's going to come out of the darkness. If they didn't have that early jump scare, I think of like the girl's face disappearing and kind of bleh, or like the loud noise when she sees the Barbie on the wall because things are hanging from weird angles. I think that you would not be primed in the same way to be for it to evoke the same terror when you're just watching cartoons with a little kid. Or like, to me, the cheapest part of this movie was the the like actual physical harm brought to a child. Like, I don't understand whose benefit that was for, to have a kid stick a knife in his eye, or even the implication of a kid sticking a knife in his eye.
Right. We don't see it, but yeah.
Yeah, we hear that he did it, and like we see the blood splatters, and later on in the film we get the sense that the demon is killing him and then like rewinding it and then killing him again. We're hearing like this rewind sound of a kid crying and blood splattering and then unsplattering. So it's sort of doing something weird with time. But I found that like, I don't want to sound like an old person. I found that distasteful. Like, I feel like it's a 4-year-old kid. I don't know what kind of pleasure a demon's getting out of hurting them, or like what pleasure we, the audience, are supposed to get out of being like, oh yeah, that 4-year-old's really, transgressed in some way.
Right. I think it was meant to, disturb. Mm-hmm. And I think it did that. And I don't know. I get what you're saying, which is that it's one of those things that it's like hurting an animal in a horror movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's just a really easy way to upset people.
Yeah.
And if you're like, again,
Megan.
when you don't have like a plot that's solid, you can do whatever. And so when that stuff happens, it feels even more unearned.
Well, I also think
that makes sense.
It makes sense. I also think it's not scary. Like, to me, like the idea of physical danger, when you're thinking about like sleep paralysis, and the idea of like, what's really scary is when he goes to that door and he's climbing on the ceiling, he's going through a doorway. Again, guys, out of context, it's not going to make any sense. But if you've seen the movie, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. There's one part where the child is crawling through a doorway from the ceiling perspective, and the door closes behind him, and he kind of turns around, and it's become a dollhouse that's kind of like kind of blocked by a bunch of Legos. And the entire movie, you've kind of been hearing this really loud cartoon music, like this public domain footage cartoon music that he's been watching, and it's always been in the background.
That loop scene I really liked with the cartoon.
Yeah, I really like that too. So as he's like looking at the house, it's getting smaller and like winking out of existence, and the like Lego blocks around it are getting bigger, and he's sort of, you get the sense the perspective is that he is moving farther away. But as he's moving farther away, the house, his portal back to his own home, the sound of the TV is getting louder and is becoming like cacophony. Like, it's just becoming so loud. And that to me is very, very scary. I can't explain why that's really scary, that the sounds are getting louder as your home portal is getting farther away. But all I can say is when I was a kid, I had a lot of sleep paralysis issues. And this was like it's like he went into my dreams and took what happened.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree that's the stuff. I actually thought the 572 days thing was kind of creepy. Because now the more we talk about it, I do very firmly believe this is happening in a like that kid is already dead. Because like kind of what we're circling around is like you asked the question, like, whose perspective is this and why is it shot this way? And I guess my answer to that is it's trying to be shot like a dream, like a nightmare.
Yeah.
And for that reason, in a nightmare or in a dream, perspective constantly changes. Everything's kind of a blur. And it's being shot in a way so that it feels abstract like a nightmare would. But I think that actually works really well also with the demonic themes of it. Because like, what would you say? I have an answer to this, a personal answer. But what would you say is what makes a good horror movie?
Dread. I think it's something that sticks with you, and it makes you uncomfortable because of the closeness you're getting to something that's outside of your understanding. That's what I think horror, like real good horror is. It's like something that's beyond real. And so, but like hits something deep inside you, like primordial. Yeah.
I think that's a very good answer.
Thank you.
I would add one component to it, is that for me, what makes it really good is if they're able to make you feel that dread about something that you wouldn't normally feel that about.
Right. I mean,
about the everyday, the mundane, right?
It's a great quote about David Foster Wallace that he said of David Lynch, that he made the horrifying mundane and the mundane horrifying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I would say that's why, for example, when there's so many movies about demons, right? And whenever they just show the demon, like the one I always go to is, and it's nothing against this movie, Sinister,
but cool.
Where it's like, oh yeah, he does look like a member of Slipknot, and he's jumping out in front of me. It's like, yeah, You know how scary, the subtle scariness of a man dressed in a spooky mask.
They were doing so well. They were doing so well too. Like the old footage. I love your guys' take on the whole Bagul thing. I think it's great.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like slasher movies, I think, are fun for other reasons. But like when it's just like a person with a knife, I'm like, that's not the scary part.
Yeah.
Like The Shining is a good example. Jack with the axe is scary, but it's not what makes me scared of The Shining.
Yes.
It is the demonic forces that are happening around it.
Yes.
And
I think.
And so. Oh, go on.
No, please finish that thought, please.
Oh, and so this movie has both for me, because you know what feels like an easy scare is, what if this toy suddenly changed its face and looked scary? They do that in this, versus the general vibe of the movie to depict something that I always love seeing depicted in movies, which is, again, demonic forces. I love it when a demon is depicted in a way that's so abstract that it's kind of beyond our comprehension, because that's how it should be. It should be like an ant and a human, right? Or us and an alien. Like, I love it when we do that with aliens too, where it feels like weird magic, and it's like, no, you just don't understand it.
Yeah.
So to have Skinamarink have the style be this really abstract, surreal way where things are sticking to the wall, and suddenly it's a dollhouse and the toys, and like apparently like years have suddenly passed in this dream. At least that's implied. And these whispers, and these like illegible sounds, like that to me feels demonic in a very unique way, because it is abstract. It is like the incoherent, and that I love that about this.
I mean, have you ever seen the documentary? It's by the guy who made the Room 237 documentary. If that's what's called. It's called The Nightmare.
I saw. Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
I
saw some of Room 237.
Room 237 is about The Shining. It's great. This guy also made one called The Nightmare about night terrors. But what he did was people who have like sleep paralysis, which again is like this weird thing. It's an actual physical thing, but they can't really seem to figure out like why, like scientifically, why some people have them, why some people don't. It's basically you are awake, like you're conscious that you're awake, but like you can't move, and you have auditory and visual hallucinations, and you can feel like very much like you are suspended out of your body. Or for me, like it's like I'm always hovering 2 feet below my body, like I'm phasing through the floor. And when you describe them to people, they don't sound that scary. So what the documentary did very well was they did reenactments. They recreated what it was like too. And the whole movie is shot like from the weird warped perspective of someone having a night terror. So the angles will be all wrong and the shadows will be too big. But what they found was just across the board, people have the same night terror. Like, we're not dreaming of different things. Like, none of these are like unique to our persons. What they're all dreaming of is basically like 3 different types. One is the alien, like the alien with the round head, sort of like the Skinamarink imagery. One is a guy in a fedora, which is literally like the Freddy Krueger. So like it's just like the same shape. It's like a black outline of a man. This is what I had a lot of times growing up before I ever saw Nightmare on Elm Street. Was like literally a guy would be standing in the doorway, but he would be made out of shadow. Like he was just the absence of color, and he'd be wearing a fedora.
Did the presence of pickup artists help you feel less scared of fedoras?
I mean, when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, I was like, oh, it's that guy. I was like, oh, this makes sense. And then later you learn that's just like what Wes Craven had his own night terror and based Freddy Krueger on that. But it is it's a culturally shared image that people who have like had sleep paralysis and are more primed to be, I don't know if they're thrill seeking or if they go out and search for scary stuff because they are just so primed to being like just not being able to sleep well, or what it like causes in people. But like as soon as you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, and if you've had sleep paralysis, you're like, oh, that guy, that thing that like has been haunting me my whole life. So it's a very familiar feeling. So what this movie does well is like it captures some of that. I think the very end scene of Skinamarink, like the face hovering. When I used to have night terrors, I would phase between the floorboards, and there would be a voice, a disembodied voice, being like, "You're so thirsty," and I'd like look around, and I wouldn't be able to see anything. I was half between the floor and the ceiling, and then and then a face would come out of the darkness, like whooshing up real quick, and it would go, "And I want crackers!" Like just yelling it until it became a siren scream. And like this does not sound that scary, but I'm telling you, as a child, as a reoccurring feeling, that siren scream of crackers turning into just like a wail, like just turning into like a loud ringing, like was the scariest thing Like, I would just, like, wet the bed. I had constant issues as a kid because of this reoccurring night terror. And this movie was like that. It just captured it. Like, it's so hard to evoke what terror that can bring to a child unless you shoot it, I think, from a child's either perspective or not even perspective, but, like, the way the world looks to a child when it's going through something like this and not understanding.
That is... I understand completely how that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. That brings me to something we haven't talked about yet, which feels, I think this is one of those things that people kind of maybe rolled their eyes at, but I think was extremely necessary. And I know why they did this for practical reasons. I want to talk about the film grain.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Because one, most likely they shot this on digital cameras and added that.
Of course they did, yeah, loops.
And I think that is to hide the budget a little bit. But I don't think it's only for that reason. Because what the film grain did to me is it recreated why people are like, as a child and as an adult, you get scared of the dark. Because by making it grainy and constantly changing, you start seeing patterns everywhere in the movie. And that's why, like, there's so many shots where it's like a closet door or a bedroom door or whatever, and there's darkness beyond, and you're looking at it, and I seriously had these moments where I'm like, I can't tell if he's digitally adding something there or I'm just seeing it.
Yeah, and he does it very, I think he does it very well. He only adds stuff, I think, near the end where you realize, like, oh, there's, like, eyes in the darkness. But you've been waiting the whole movie. This whole movie's been... it's like the grain loops. That's what's like a lot of people are complaining about, is that it's very digitally added because like you'll see the same grain specks in a loop. But to me, that plays into the media res of it, because that's what the monster's doing to the TV, right? So what if the monster is just the movie? Like,
right. That is, yeah. I've had to add grain before, and it's very hard to do grain if you haven't shot on film. And so yeah, like. I didn't even look for the loop because it was just like, yeah, that shit's tough. But you're right, is that does kind of thematically add into the idea that time is looping.
Yeah, and like in the idea too that like I've had I think Lon describe this movie as ASM horror, like ASM horror, and like
this is I thought of it as like the movie Fantasia but for horror.
Yeah,
where it's like reverse ASMR or. Yeah.
And that's like really, I'm be honest, like that's for me. That's like that. I don't know who else that's for, but like that is for Drew. Like that's a Drew thing to like want, and that's a Drew thing to like be receptive to. So like, yes, it is like a lot of whispering and a lot of like noises, and you're just kind of straining your ears. Luckily they subtitle some of it, but other parts not. And you're just like, what are they saying? And again, going to the night terror of it all, that is how things sound when you're in one of these auditory hallucinations. It will just be like, like there's like little weird noises and you're just like, what's going on? Like you can't move your eyes. So like that sense of like, what is happening? Who is talking? Why are they even whispering if they're in the house like alone? Like what?
That's the big benefit. I know most people can't, it's select theaters right now, but that's the benefit of seeing it in a theater because you don't know it. Like when I first started, I was like, do I need to turn this up? Like I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
If the movie wanted me to hear it. And when you see it in theaters, you know right away, like, okay, this is not for hearing.
I mean, like, it's got a Nolan-esque vibe where I'm, like, wondering in Dolby how much of this is not going to translate to, like, home theaters because it's, like, Tenet or something where it's like, no. He wanted us to see this in theaters because he didn't want us to hear the dialogue of this movie. Doesn't make any sense. This movie, like, has a kind of similar vibe where I'm just like, yeah, I think it's going to lose people if you're not enveloped in sound because in the theater, it's like every, it's the kids versus the demonic entity moving around when it's the shuffling of feet. Like, you can hear the kids shuffle. They have a very specific kind of, like, noise shuffle. And to your point, I'm not even sure if Skinamarink is a demonic presence. I think, and again, this is going off a little bit it's unfairly, it's based on like extra material, but I think it's another child. Because the way it talks to the kids and what it like is trying to do seems very kid-like. What it says when it's the parents is very childlike. It's like, we love you very much, like when it's pretending to be the mom. That's
true.
And
I actually, sorry to amend it, I would say instead of the word demonic, I should use paranormal. But go on.
Yeah, so it's something like that. It wants to play with this boy, and it's when at the end when it kind of makes its case for itself or what it is, reveals itself. It's like, I can do anything I want. Your sister wasn't listening to me, so I took away her like eyes and mouth. It's not talking like the way that like something that can speak Latin Or like
right. It's more like the Twilight Zone kid
Yeah.
who also removes the eyes and mouth or the mouth of his sister.
So
it's that idea of like, I want to play with you.
Exactly. And so the movie, the short film Heck that he has, is about 20 minutes long, and it's probably his big claim to fame YouTube feature, is about very similar to some Skinamarink, but it's about just one kid and he's missing his mom in a house that looks, I'm pretty sure it's the same house. And at one point, in that movie, the chyrons go by pretty frequently. You're getting 100 days, 200 days. You're getting 5,000 days, and the kid's voice is changing as he's growing up. He's getting older, but he's just trying to find his mom, and he's just like, "Mom, I'm sorry, I got cancer." And then I think the end of the movie is just him saying, "Mom, I think we're in hell." So I feel like that kind of gives away maybe either what Skinamarink is, or what became of this kid was it became another presence in the house to torture this next round of kids.
That's ultimately what I think is being depicted here is hell or purgatory, or what it means to be a ghost, or just to be trapped in an abyss, because that's the general vibe is and that's why the filmmaking technique works, in my opinion. And that's why you kind of have to do it throughout, because they're there throughout the whole thing, right? So it needs to be this idea of part of what makes it hell is that it's incoherent for the characters.
Right.
They're not, it's a dream. It's they don't really physically exist.
Right.
To me, it's their consciousness is what we're watching. And sometimes there's an arm and a leg or feet, but that's why we don't really see anyone or any faces, and why it's just a general dream-like existence.
Yeah, and why it's sort of they don't seem to have any effect on the world around them. They don't seem to be able to do anything except to each other. It's sort of how you would imagine a ghost being able to move or do stuff. It's it might be on the ceiling, it might be making noise, it might be able to go in and out of existence, but it can't physically interact with the world that much. It can bring its Legos down or maybe stick something on the ceiling, but it can't have an effect on the daytime world or the outside world. So by removing all the windows and doors, they can't ever see sunlight. There is no light,
And also everything's kind of a memory. The shows they're watching, we don't really see them a lot of the time. They're just, it's blown out on the screen, or it starts looping, or it's just these specific toys, and then the toys kind of stick places and go weird. The geography starts getting weird, and it feels like they're kind of losing their sense of reality because their memories of reality are fading.
Exactly. That's exactly what I felt, because I kept being wait, is the kitchen supposed to have that narrow of a door frame? I'm because you get a sense of the room, I think, or the house when, I think it's a duplex actually, because it looks really too narrow to be a regular house. There's an upstairs, it's a downstairs, but it seems almost sliced in half. And as the movie goes on, it's hard to tell because again, you're only just getting weird angles of it, but it seems the house is almost either compressing or changing angles. I just felt the kitchen area didn't make any sense to me the way they were shooting it. It felt there was a wall, and then there was a little, the tiniest of inlets, and then there was the kitchen area. So I don't know, it just felt there's some weird looping going on, and there's some weird angles. I think in the beginning when you hear a little muffled thump, and you see a door opening in the closet and something falls down off of it, I think that's supposed to imply that is the kid from the future, because later on he will open the door and from the ceiling and drop something down from that angle.
Right.
So it's, so I think there's a lot there. I don't think you can write off this movie and just say oh, it's just a bunch of nothing. I think there's actually
no. I think it's made with a lot of intent, I think.
Yeah, I know.
And one of the reasons why I think that actually is also what I think is going to be a problem with the movie, because again, it's very polarizing. I want to note that the running time is 100 minutes, not 80 minutes, 100 minutes. And the question I think a lot of people are asking is, why did it need to be that long if it's so slow? And I've seen a lot of people say this should have been a short, right? A lot of people, if this didn't work on you, you're just bored watching it. I did get bored sometimes watching it. Not, obviously there's some amazing scenes in it that really are going to stick with me, but I couldn't help to every now and then be my eyes are glazing over a little bit. And I guess my question is after this conversation, I don't think there's an answer here. Is that like, could you make this shorter, or could you use this device sparingly in a narrative that was more coherent?
I mean,
and I don't know if you could.
I mean, like, I don't know. Like, could Eraserhead be shorter? Like, I guess, like,
Right.
you could. Like, that movie has tons of boring parts of it. I would argue, like, Lynch's scariest stuff has, like, a ton of boring parts in it. Like, that episode 8 of Twin Peaks The Return with, like, the reveal of Bob. Sorry to keep going back to David Lynch, but that is, like, my thing.
It's the director... Director very much said he was inspired by Lynch, so yeah.
Yeah, so like Lynch will purposely, like we said, like he will kind of create these mundane or like annoyingly grating kind of soundscapes of just nothing happening or just like weird images, and like you just have to get used to the vibe of it, and then like the horror comes from like what is birthed after a long enough time of looking at nothing or like being annoyed by nothing. It's sort of like what takes you by surprise because you've almost gotten used to you've kind of gotten like used to being in this surreal world that he's created. Like Eraserhead's kind of unwatchable. Like people who say that they love that movie are like either lying or they just mean it like they mean it conceptually.
Yeah, hard agree. Did you ever see the movie Begotten?
No, what's that?
It is 70 minutes of pure hell. It is the director made Shadow of the Vampire.
Oh my
God!
God!
You remember that?
Did Willem Dafoe and John Malkovich?
Yes, they made Begotten in 1989, and then Shadow of the Vampire in 2000. Nothing in between.
What?
And I can't. I think they made some shorts, but that always amazed me because Begotten is a cult film. I saw it on VHS, and again, 70 minutes. It felt like 3 hours long. It was hell.
Jesus.
It is one of the most. It's an extremely hard to watch film.
Yeah.
I remember part of the soundtrack is just like the sound of someone choking for a while.
Oh my God.
It starts with someone like disemboweling themselves.
What?
It's in gritty black and white, like really high contrast black and white. Just Google Begotten film and you'll see shots from it.
Just the three characters being named God killing himself, Mother Earth, and Son of Earth Flesh seems very Oberlin College to me.
Yeah, yes. Oh yeah, no, it is 100%. It is very artsy. I can't even tell you if it's good.
Yeah.
But I've never forgotten the movie because it was fucking wild. But again, it was 70 minutes because at least the director knew I have very little time.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
I think it goes to like, you know, the Guy Madden films too. Like I think there's a certain thing where it's, again, you have to approach these as not movies. I think like my dad made me go see.
It's an art piece.
It's an art piece. My dad made me go see. Was it Einstein on the Beach a couple years ago? I think that's the 4-hour Philip Glass atonal opera.
Oh Christ!
And like just leading up to like having to force myself to go watch that, like I was like clawing my face off. I was like, please don't. I was trying to come up with any excuse not to go see a 4-hour atonal Philip Glass opera. Like why? Like why would you do that? But my dad's that kind of weird hippie where like that is like to him like the height of art. So I'm watching it and I found myself like kind of digging it. It just kind of puts you into a trance. Like you're lulled by it. Like it's just like weird, you know, just people just singing like one note or just singing like 1, 2, 3, just like over and over and over in different like ranges. And like, yeah, after a while, after the first like 30 minutes, when you stop resisting, you're like, oh, this is like art. This is putting me in a different state of being that I will go into in my everyday life. This is making me take a step back and like recontextualize what life is and what my day-to-day is, because I'm just being forced into something that is an experience. And I think that's very much what this movie does. Oh,
100%. That's what good art should do, right? And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then it's a real problem,
yeah.
Right? Because then it's kind of a nightmare. If you sat down and watched that and you hated it, then it's like I hate this more than anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why this movie is obviously so polarizing, because it is a movie that normally someone would make as an experimental short. Or like, again, you could use this as a device in a horror movie to show the horror, but it's very unique to not really meet people halfway. Like this was made unconditionally, where it's like, no, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be long. It's going to be 100 minutes. And in order to tell this story, it has to be incoherent throughout. Because I do agree, like to depict this sort of hellish existence, it can never be coherent.
But it's not nonsense. It's not just like, you're not just being like, it's not just the movie from The Ring, Inside of the Ring, where it's just like scary image,
No.
scary image, scary image. There's something happening. It's just happening very slowly and very like, like almost like boringly. It's just like watching a bunch of people go about their day-to-day life, or a child go about its day-to-day life of just not doing anything.
Absolutely. I think this director thought about every shot. It's not the movie from The Ring. The movie from The Ring I find very irritating.
Yeah.
Because that's like, I feel like they were like, just do a music video, you know?
Yeah.
Just do like a bunch of fucking Tool music video bullshit. But this is made with intent. This is a piece of art, I would argue.
I agree.
Yeah.
And
it's just very obvious why it's polarizing based off how unconditional they made this.
Well, look, again, like there's a very funny video I think that they were doing for Eraserhead after it came out, where they were just filming people on the street, like for marketing purposes, but just like getting their reactions. And like most people were walking out and they're like, what the hell? Like they were like, I can't believe I watched this whole thing, or like, what was that? I hated it, trash, garbage. And one guy comes out, and I forget what he's wearing, but he's obviously just a weirdo. And he goes, loved it. This is my 5th showing. And like you're just like, yeah, it will speak to who it speaks to, like his long hair, and like you're just like, oh yeah, that's the fan of Eraserhead right there. And someone of like I taught a class on David Lynch in college. I was very obsessed with him, but his shorts are way scarier than Eraserhead. I think Eraserhead being his first film was so experimental and so just novel that people were like, oh hell yeah, let's give him Elephant Man. Mel Brooks like champion for him to direct Elephant Man, which is a very coherent, cogent, very
bold move,
right? But I mean, that was Mel Brooks's call, because he was just like, I love Eraserhead. But to be fair, David Lynch had done a lot of cooler, creepier, more experimental shorts that just like no one had seen before that. And so like this is, I think Heck is like a very good version and a very short version of Skinamarink that you can like go and watch on YouTube right now.
Oh, I'll definitely check it out. Yeah. And that is surprising, because I feel like if someone does the experimental stuff, moving them to doing like a movie with a very specific plot, that feels like you're rolling the dice there a little bit, right? Because it's like, I don't know if the director of Skinamarink can make a narrative film. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. This does feel like, though, and again, it's important, is that this has intent behind it. This isn't just, I'm going to throw a bunch of shit together. On the other side of that, I want to make it clear that like the snobby way to think of Eraserhead or this is like when people like it, it's very easy to say, oh, they didn't get it. And it's like, no. They might have got it.
Yeah.
They just didn't like it.
There's not much to get. There's not,
exactly.
There's not like a ton going on here. Like even Eraserhead probably had like more probably to say, or more that was like going on with the imagery, but like there's not much to get. It's like it's just a very young child's perspective that you're being forced to adopt for a long period of time. Although I'd argue that like this seems harder to me to make than a narrative film. The fact that it's even making any money or engrossing anybody, when like narrative is the easier part than like mood setting. I'd say a lot of people fail at it. Like a lot of people write shitty narratives. That's obviously true, but like not everyone's trying to write a heist movie, right? Not everyone's trying to do a Red Notice. Like a very simple plot can be made out of like most horror films. You can just direct line it, you know? So you don't need to come up with something very clever to write a compelling horror narrative horror film. So I think this guy could probably. I mean, I've been watching a ton of his shorts recently. I think it's admirable that he never tried to make one of those look for the ghost in the picture thing. Like his things are entirely evocative. Like his nightmare videos are they're never jump scares. It's always just sort of like, here's me taking what you're saying is a nightmare and like giving you a weird interpretation of it, where it's just a mood. It's just like noises in a background, and it's just like, oh, you had a bad dream that you were at a party and you saw flashing lights outside and they were aliens. Well, here's like a moodscape of what that would be like. I think that's just really cool. I'm really impressed by what he's been doing. So I'm excited to see what he's got going on next.
That's how I feel, where it's that as a centrist, as a Skinamarink centrist, I've just noticed like that really who likes this and who doesn't like this, it doesn't necessarily, it has nothing to do with those who they are, it feels like.
Yeah.
Where it's interesting where it's like, I'm sure there's people who are like, I like experimental shit and I didn't like this. And for me, it's like, I like a lot of this. And the thing that put me off was, when there's loud noises or jump scares and it just pops my nerves in this way where I'm like, well, that's not scary. I have a headache.
Yeah. It's so funny because, I mean, I thought of you immediately when that happened, but I thought, oh, they've been priming us for so long and they've restrained from the jump scares that having that one near the end, I was like, that's like the relief. That's like the, okay, well, we need to get it out of the way. And I just really didn't like the part that was like the physical, the implication of physical violence done to a child.
Right.
So I was like, that's unnecessary for a mood piece, you know?
But like, regardless of how I feel about it, is still the one thing that's amazing about this. The reason I'm talking about this movie, I'm putting out a podcast about this and not Knock at the Cabin, is because you look at this and you're like, holy shit, this is making so much buzz. And it's not like Blair Witch. Like, I understand why Blair Witch had a low budget and made a lot of money, right? I understand why Paranormal Activity had a low budget and made a lot of money. The fact that this had a low budget and then made a lot of money is wild to me because of what it is, because it is purely experimental.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, really? We're into this now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's great. I haven't seen The Outwaters yet, but I hear that's a little surreal.
I mean, I think it's like a Shudder thing, and that's why I really hope that Shudder gets stuck around and AMC doesn't like give it the axe, because this is all.
Me too.
Because
me too.
like this is all Shudder. I mean, I didn't feel a certain kind of love of a wounded, what's it called, a wounded fawn that a lot of people felt, but I really like what Josh Rubin and I think Travis Stevens directed it, but like I really loved that it exists, and I think that's how people feel about Skinamarink, right? Like it's just like it gives a platform to and allows these like midnight films to sort of have a resurgence, whereas before like we've been shut out with so much Disney and like Marvel and stuff. It has felt like for a long time that you couldn't get a small film made that was in any way experimental or not being made by a giant studio. And this finally feels like maybe there's a space for horror to sort of lead the way on bringing back independent cinema that is just weird for weird's sake, and there's a budget for it, or like they'll market it for you if you make it, you know?
That's what it is it feels like the backlash to Marvel is so big because Marvel is I would argue, the most corporate movies have ever gotten.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that means the indie backlash is even fucking weirder.
Yeah.
And that's what is kind of amazing me is I look at horror specifically and it's like, okay, we had a decade of like elevated horror. And then stuff like The Green Knight started coming out.
The A24, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, this is still as a narrative, but it's surreal. It's dreamlike. And then we're getting this, and this is big, and it's like, holy shit. How experimental are we going to get in this now, like, going mainstream pocket of horror? It's kind of amazing to see this happen to horror right now. And, like, we still have slasher films. We still have the other types of horror. But it's making me feel real good about the future and horror. And it's, like, one more reason why the Oscars have to start thinking about horror movies.
Right, because when Pearl, which I think is one of the most cinematically impressive movies to come out of, like, this decade, probably. Like, just in terms of, like, what it looks like, the scope of it, like, how they shot it, and the performances in it. When Pearl gets shut out of the Oscars, I'm like, come on, guys. Like, at this point, and Nope as well. Like, you're just messing with us, because, like, that looks better than Tar. Like,
Ty West is a director who it's like he should have had recognition a while ago. Yeah. It's wild how that is, how shut out horror is, because now more than ever, horror is one of the biggest sources of art.
Yeah. It is.
Like,
the performances
it's
in
incredible.
The performances in it, like when you think of Florence
Some of the
Pugh,
best performances,
Mia Goth is just like one of these ones where I'm just like, what the hell, guys? Like, I don't even consider Pearl horror. We're getting a little off topic, but I don't consider Pearl horror. Like, it's like Mildred Pierce with a horror bent to it, but it is more just like a kitchen sink weepy that is done up like a slasher film. And I think that there's so much to be played with in terms of tone and like experience here, that there will be something for everyone. Even if you're not a horror person, you're probably like an art person, right? Like you guys like art, right? Like there's something here for everybody.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say this is a little more towards the experiment. Like I wouldn't expect this to be up for an Oscar.
No, not this, but something.
Yeah. But the point being that it's wild how some of the most bold art we're getting is out of horror now.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's almost because no one else is doing it. And so the horror community is like, all right, fine, we'll do it. Because horror has always been a place for indie filmmakers, right? Peter Jackson, Sam Raimi. People get their start in horror a lot because it's accessible. But it's the fact that they're looking at that position. They're like, well, if no one else is doing weird or like even like adult dramas, like we're going to do it. Let's do it.
Under the Shadow.
It's just a bummer that like Lupita Nyong'o should fucking get an Oscar for Us, you know?
Yeah.
It's like that's the part where it's a bummer that like the mainstream won't meet them there, but I'm glad they're doing it.
I just don't get like how you can look at Nope and be like, that is not cinematically impressive enough to earn a nomination. Like that
last best sound design.
The best
Are
sound
you
design.
shitting me?
I mean, exactly. Like it's that, and the sound score again. The score for Pearl. Just like you're just like, holy shit! Like these are movies that are love letters to movies. I thought that's what you guys wanted, right? But
yeah, it's because they're all old people. Like that's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
It's just mostly old people who watch certain movies.
Well, Pearl to me is just like, it's weird because it seems like a love letter to old movies. But that's my Pearl rant, and that's for another time. But I'd say I think Skinamarink is a trend in the right direction. I'd also say like TikTok is like onto this. I mean, the reason that everyone was creating their own buzz about this movie is because this is like born out of that sort of ARG-esque, like alternate reality games. Like there's a channel on YouTube I love called Night Mind that basically will just break down where these channels are and like what they're about. Like we'll tell you where these hidden games and narratives have been running for the past decade. As people get older and they sort of morph them, they'll go from Twitter to TikTok to Tumblr to YouTube, and they'll have hidden codes, and they'll, these are like long interactive games that people have been developing since like they were in high school. And while Kyle Edward Ball is like kind of like on the outskirts of that because he's not really in the crowd-sourced gaming part of it, like it's kind of like weirdly it's kind of like what kind of gave birth to QAnon in a way. Like it's this sort of like weird hidden codes. Find the treasure map. Find the key. Another good example of one is like Under the Silver Lake by the guy who made It Follows.
It Follows. Yeah, I love both of those movies.
Yeah, Under the Silver Lake, they hired...
He needs to make another movie.
He needs to. But, he hired a cryptologist who solved this... not the Caesar cipher. He solved the cipher that no one had solved in, like, hundreds of years. He hired that guy to put ciphers in Under the Silver Lake that people have been able to follow to a certain point, and then no one's been able to, like, actually crack it.
That's
like,
so cool.
That, to me, is the coolest thing.
Yeah. I love It Follows. To me is the perfect blend of experimental and practical, like, or slasher, like, horror. That's my favorite horror movie of the last 20 years, maybe.
I'm glad to hear you say that. A lot of people, I feel like there's been some backlash to It Follows, and I really love it.
I fucking love It Follows.
Yeah.
I do want to know, it really feels like the internet is what did this, because it's not just horror. I'm thinking of comedy as well. Like the meme culture is very surreal. The sketch show I Think You Should Leave, which I've been watching nonstop.
Oh my god,
that's one of those things where it's like, it reminds me of like Kids in the Hall or even Monty Python.
Yeah,
where it's like we've had surrealist phases. And I love that it's coming back, and it's almost like sort of naturally returned because the internet seems to invite that style, and I think the world is so fucked too, but that people like that form of escapism.
Yeah, I think I think that's right. We grew up on Adult Swim, so that's like our reference for like what random and like cool, like Tim Heidecker is like a producer. I think You Should Leave, and is often like
he's in it. Yeah.
His on cinema stuff that he's been doing now, I think it's completely online, but it is incredible, and it is the slowest burn. You have to watch 6 to 7 seasons of this guy's fake movie review show of him and the guy who plays Neil Hamburger, what's his name? Greg Turkington, just doing their like passive aggressive movie review shows that are like 5 minutes long. But as you get into like season 5 years of this worth of content of them reviewing every single movie, a narrative starts to emerge of like what's happening off camera, like what's going on. And Tim's like, held a music festival and accidentally like overdosed a bunch of kids on his vape pen. And like that itself is a 4-hour trial that you can watch separately. Like they've created all this like hidden content that like, if you know about the Sun 6 trial, like you can watch 4 hours of a straight, like done straight Tim Heidecker being tried for the death of all these kids due to like vape pen overdoses. And like, that's the kind of shit I'm here for. I'm here to watch 4 hours of a fake trial that's done like super straight. It's like auxiliary information about this other web show that he does. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. It's a commitment though.
It is, but it's great. I love this shit. And that's why Skinamarink, it's like, I'm never going to be mad at you. And I would argue for people who hated this movie is that it's fine. It's fine to hate a movie, right? But the success of this movie is a very good thing that will benefit you directly.
Yes.
If you like horror movies or indie movies or just art in general, even if you didn't like this, you might like the next thing that gets greenlit because of this.
Yes, you don't have to like the
next
reason.
thing is yeah, exactly, where it's opening up this world of it's basically a proof of concept of like abstract shit can sell right now.
Yeah, and even if you don't like abstract shit, that's also fine. But what this is meaning is that you can make your own movie and like have it be as narrative as you want, but like there will be a platform potentially for it. Like there will be some place to watch it.
It'll resonate all the way to major films where it's like weird. They're like even Marvel is realizing like we can be weird.
Yeah, I mean who they're hiring.
Everything everywhere all at once is the more mainstream version where that's another proof of concept where it's like, oh, weird is okay.
Yeah.
Faster is okay because our culture, we've gotten more and more used to this pacing. We've gotten more and more used to abstract concepts that we can just get weirder and weirder and weirder and produce even more advanced ideas in art.
Yeah.
And it'll go from everywhere from indie to mainstream.
And I'd argue too, like the playing around with form, like the opposite version of this, right, would be something like Andor that took like the world of Star Wars and rooted it in like a very political, like Jar Jar, non-alien, non-robot droid things. Like it just made it like it turned Star Wars into a political drama, basically.
I really need to watch that because that sounds like exactly my jam.
It is amazing. There's a 3-episode prison arc directed by the guy who created the American House of Cards, Bo Willimon, and like it is maybe the 3 best hours of television that you'll spend this year. Like I know Last of Us is pretty good, people love it, but like this is real to me. This is like it has Andy Serkis in it. It's incredible, and it's just so moving and powerful to our times. But what it shows is like, yeah, even Marvel, even Disney, all these companies, or just one company, I guess, has to start thinking outside the box, putting James Gunn in front of DC, you know, putting Taika and, you know, Sam Raimi in charge of like some Marvel films. Like these are all moves that are pointing to a certain kind of chaos, or at least a certain kind of like, well, let's try it.
It's them realizing like again, I haven't been very happy with blockbusters, but James Gunn, like I have Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
I love that movie. And the idea that this motherfucker isn't just like when he was just making Marvel films, I was like, that's wild.
Yeah.
And now he's in charge of DC.
Yeah.
And it's like,
the
do they
guy.
know what they did? Do they
They put the guy from Slither in charge of DC. Like that's awesome. Go ahead.
That is, I love that progression. I love that idea that like, yeah, we're embracing weird. And because comic book movies, when you think about it, the reason James Gunn works so well for comics is because comics are abstract and weird.
Yeah, we should
There's
know
a fucking
that.
talking raccoon.
Yeah.
There's all this weird stuff where it's like, yeah, embrace that. That's what you do. You embrace the weirdness. You don't make a serious, gritty version.
Or like if you're going to make a serious gritty, because there's Frank Millers of the world, right? Like there just needs to be room for all of it. Like I love that they hired the Loki director. That they hired Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead to do the next season of Loki, because they are like
they are.
Yeah, man.
Oh, that makes me so excited.
I just profiled them for Fangoria, not once
Holy
but twice.
Fucking shit!
And they are they're amazing. Yeah,
I'm Twitter buddies with one of them. I love their work so much. They holy shit.
Yeah, so they're doing the new season of Loki. There's set images. I mean, I just saw them like a month ago, the screening of their very indie film, Something in the Dirt, which is...
I still need to see that. Is that on streaming finally?
I think it is on streaming, actually.
Okay, good.
And it's not part of their weird... it's sort of related to their weird own cinematic universe that they have going on with like The Endless and Resolution, but it's like its own thing. And they are very much of the Skinamarink world, I'd argue. Like they were like the earlier versions of this micro indie horror that's just their own thing, and they refuse to like make it accessible if you don't get it. It's just not accessible.
I would say their stuff is less surreal for sure, but Spring was amazing. God damn, I gotta rewatch Spring.
Spring's great. I would say like Resolution and The Endless as companion pieces.
The Endless is my favorite.
The Endless is great. I had seen Resolution, which is the two guys in the house that they run into in The Endless. I mean, we're getting so off track, but in The Endless, there's a scene where they go visit these two guys in a house. Those two guys are actually the main characters of a previous movie they've done that all connects back to. It all loops into a larger cinematic universe that they have like planned out on a Google Drive somewhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so like, yes to all that, and like, no matter what you feel about any kind of movies or television or content, you can say that like it's better to have diversity in it, right? Like you We can't argue with that. So this is just one extreme version of this.
Creates innovation and junk.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are getting off track, so we could probably close this out, right?
Sure. Yeah, no,
I feel like I've said everything I need to say about Skinamarink.
Do you feel like I've changed your mind in any way about the film or its purpose?
No, I didn't really, like I said, it was like I liked it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is I'm not like neutral. It's just that I didn't love it. And I've already expressed why, but when people are like, I love it, I'm like, that makes sense. I'm glad, like that was the thing is I that's why it's a hot take, or I seem to be one of the only people who's just like, I liked it. It's fine. Like that's how I feel about it. I've also seen a lot of experimental shit, so maybe it's that, but so have you.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think, I can give you actually a really solid reason why.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I never had night terrors.
Oh, okay.
I've barely even had nightmares. I have boring dreams.
Oh.
And I think, again, I like this for the art, but I don't think it hit me emotionally the way it hit a lot of people.
Okay, that makes sense. I think, too, like the medium on which you're going to see this is going to make a huge difference. I think, Dolby is going to... again, like we watched this movie and my boyfriend was like, this was the scariest thing ever. I don't think I'd ever watch it again because it's not going to be effective. He's like, knowing where the scares come in, knowing what's happening is not going to work. I kind of feel the opposite. I feel like watching it again would be like having the same nightmare 2 nights in a row. It kind of gets scarier on the repetition of it. But I am worried that like on watching it on TV, I'll lose a lot of what felt immersive about it.
Yeah, this is a good background movie, weirdly enough, I think. Once you get used to it. Like, this is definitely a movie that's like, when this comes out on Blu-ray, I'll grab it. I'll be happy to have this. If I know the right people where I'll be like, oh, you should check this out. This is kind of, it's not for everybody, but I know certain people that I'm going to say, oh, you should check out Skinamarink,
If I had a big house party or like was one of these rich people, I would have it on like in the background of the party, like just kind of like playing just sort of thematically on a giant screen. People could just
if I was super rich, I'd just have a room where it looped the movie.
Yeah.
I'd have a Skinamarink room.
Oh, God, that'd be amazing. Yes, and everything would be on the ceiling and it would just be like one of those weird immersive houses. Yeah. Totally.
Oh, you know what it'd be? It would be a ice skating rink themed.
Oh,
so it's a
Skinamarink. Yes.
Yeah, and so you could ice skate and watch Skinamarink.
I feel like that would draw 2 separate crowds of people, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. It would be a very confusing room.
And that's to the point.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Drew, thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this. Would you like to plug again or have some closing statement?
You can listen to me talk about Skinamarink if you like this. I have some more comments on it over at, like I said, Content Candy. It's called Salty Popcorn Reviews with me and Eric Rodriguez, Nerd Chronic. Other than that, I'm Video Drew across all social networks. If you haven't gotten that yet, that I'm also Video Drew, then that's weird. You should know that about me.
Right, you should know that.
I'm Video Drew, one word. Video Drew's one word, and I'm that on all social media. I think that's what I'm plugging right now. Oh yeah, if you get Fangoria, like pick up I think it was last print issue. I have an interview with Moorhead and Benson in there. So that's pretty cool.
Ooh, I do want to pick that up.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll plug patreon.com/gamefully unemployed, GAMEFULLY unemployed. That's our Patreon. There's some exclusive podcasts on there like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman and Fox Mulder's a Maniac and some others. There's Star Trek The Next Futurama and Spiel Boys. We also watch movies every Friday night with our patrons. There's a bunch of stuff you can do on there. We also have a merch store. If you go to gamefullyunemployed.com, you can get access to that. And that's it. We're Gamefully on Twitter if you want to follow us. That's also an option. Begotten is for sale online. While we were recording, I just bought a DVD of it.
Oh my God. Did you really?
I sure did. I just want it. It's one of those where I'm like, if the world ends, I want to have Begotten to make sure I have it, It's
like me and like all the weird looking Pokemon from Japan. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah, exactly. So in the apocalypse, people will be like, what do you have to offer? And you're like, I got these Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, it's going to be like me and the Last of Us. My contribution to society will be like, I have a bunch of old cards. Are these worth anything? No?
And they're going to be like, we are going to eat you.
Yeah, we'll be like, oh,
That's what we're going to do.
I've already decided in the post-apocalypse, I want to be, just get rid of me. Just get rid of me first. I'm just going to hinder My anxiety disorder is not going to like help. It's not going to serve any natural purpose. Like just shoot me in the head.
You're gonna be the skull in the beginning of Terminator.
You know what I want? It's just I pray that we'll have a mass grave and it won't just be like nuked up. I hope that there's a grave to bury us into. That's what I want.
All right, mass grave it is.
Yep.